bringing me nicely now to our guest on the show this morning, Robert O'Neill. Robert, good morning. How are you, sir?
I'm good morning to you, and I'm extremely fine. Thank you very much.
I'm not surprised really, because when we were having a little chat before we came on just now, you're out there in I'll say sunny Nice, but I mean Nice has got a nice climate, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. It's beautiful here. In fact, because we come down here quite often, there's friends of ours who live down here, and we were talking about this just yesterday, actually, that when you look up the third best, the top three best climates in the whole of Europe, you get Morgan in Gran Canaria, Valletta in Malta, and Nice in the south of France, because it's a sort of curved horseshoe bay and it has its own microclimate. It can actually be, even into September and October, can still be really hot, and it's tipping it down on the villages and the towns behind the mountains, and Nice can be bathed in sunshine. So when you factor in all the infrastructure here and the number of flights coming in and out from all over the world, and the fact that it's a city, and there's, you've got the bars and the restaurants that are open all year round because of the number of locals that live here. You tick all those boxes, and it's probably one of the best places in the whole of Europe, if not the world, to spend some time, because the scenery is beautiful, the food's fantastic, the sea's a gorgeous blue, azure, of course, which is what they call it, the Côte d'Azur. So it's great, really enjoy it, and the climate is we've had New
I'll
Year's
tell you,
Day
I'll
on the
tell you
beach.
what, I'll tell you what, Robert. I've already just started chatting to you, but I hate you already, because
Yeah,
it's got to be wonderful, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's beautiful.
Now, your prime reason for coming on Spectrum on Air this morning and the
Mm.
Breakfast Show is to talk about something called the Groovy Shirt Club.
Yes,
Now,
yeah, yeah.
that's an unusual name for a start, isn't it?
Okay, well, I can tell you the story of how the name evolved, which actually it was uh, another South of France episode, which is probably going to make you even more furious with me. But when I first started this particular project, it actually came about from an independent film project that actually got stopped because of COVID. But they were going to use some songs of mine, and then from that, I just carried on writing, which I've always done anyway. But I'd got this sort of body of work on the way, and I just kept going, and then wanted to put a band around it. And I was having a chat with some friends of mine in the sunshine, drinking rosé, and they go, "Well, what are you going to call it?" And it was probably two or three glasses of wine in at the time, and all three of us had got a penchant for a kind of very glorious floral patterned shirt, and all three of them were wearing one at the time. And I just looked around and went, "Well, how about Groovy Shirt Club?" And they laughed, and that became the kind of temporary name for the group. And then it stuck, and I was trying to think of all these cool rock and roll band names, and in the end I sort of stuck with it because it sounds good, and it kind of reflects what we're all about, really, as well, the kind of swirling patterns, eclectic mix of things going on,
Well,
which
this is what I was going to ask, because I mean, reading the info about the Groovy Shirt Club, you've got quite a sort of mix of musicians and people and genres as well, haven't you?
Yes, exactly. Well, I think what it's rooted in ultimately is me being a singer-songwriter. I've always written songs since I was a kid, and actually, there's a whole other story about that that's emerged recently, where I found some old tapes in my mom's loft. But essentially, the songs come first, and I think in that respect, what I do is a lot like those sort of old school songwriters, I suppose, from the 60s and 70s, where the song came first and then the band would play them. So I'm not stuck in a genre. I mean, essentially, we play rock and roll music, but in that there's a bit of funk, there's a bit of blues, there's tracks got jazz influences in them. We do very, very gentle acoustic ballads to sort of out and out, almost, 70s rock. Zeppelin influenced guitar riffs going on. So it's a very, very broad spectrum, which is what groups, like the Beatles and the Stones and Led Zeppelin used to do and Queen, from all those sort of legacy acts. So there's a sort of core group of musicians who get involved in the recordings, and what I do is bring people together that can deliver the song in a studio. So, but it's still kind of band orientated. So essentially, we've got Neil on drums, who always plays the drums, and Rich on bass, and then Ola, who does some the sort of female vocal side of it. Sometimes she does backing vocals and harmonies, and more latterly she's taken the lead vocal, or we do dual harmonies. So I've got that, my fingertips to do whatever needs to be done to bring out the best in the song. And to cap it all, we have two genius keyboard players. Mike, who plays with people like Kid Creole, the Coconuts, and Us Three and Culture Club. My brother Bruce, who until recently was a head of music at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and he's played with everyone. And so, and there's no egos. There's always this balance about what people listening to what the song needs and doing their best they can to bring it out. So we don't get narrowed down into this sound, which is sort of very similar from song to song, which you can get with a lot of acts. Some of which I like and got a lot of respect for, but I'm not going to name. But when you listen to an album of theirs, the 12 tracks on the LP are kind of in virtually the same headspace and the same arrangement, and stylistically very similar. Whereas the albums that I put out and the songs that I release are essentially led by the song itself, rather than trying to go, well, we're this genre and we do this. So, and it's not a sort of contrived thing. It's just simply what comes out and how I like to do things. And it's a sort of old school, retro, vintage, recording songs with using tape kind of feel, really.
Well, you and the group must get tremendous satisfaction out of that, because, as you say, you sort of you can go whichever way you like, can't you?
Yeah, exactly. We can flip around and change direction and all sorts of things, and done different versions and different arrangements of songs. But the team that I've got around me of musicians are really sensational players, and it's rewarding for them, because the better a musician is, typically the more variety that they like, the more they like to experiment. But within that, if it's something that's very simple, we've got, for example, if Mike and Bruce are both exceptionally skilled, experienced keyboard players, but if it just needs a kind of like a plinging a pedal on the same note all the way through the chorus, they'll do it. But then if they have to go off in sort of jazz funk riffs and are covering the full length of the keyboard, they can do that as well. So it is always about the song, and the players bring their own personality and character to it, which I try and capture in a way of recording, which is done old school, although it's recorded onto a laptop or whatever. When you get them in the studio, we're playing it together and we try and do it in one take.
I was going to ask you about that, because the technology. I mean, you're in Nice at the moment, and
Yeah.
presumably the others are in different parts of the UK or whatever. And I mean, do you use that sort of technology, or do you actually all get together to
we physically get together. I mean, we use the technology to communicate with them. I mean, I have recording software on my laptop, which I use to demo songs, which starts off with an acoustic song, which I sing and play on acoustic guitar on its own, and then build the arrangements up to that. And then using the recording software, I can program the drum beat, or program a bass line, play a little bit of keyboards, put some backing vocals on, or extra guitars, whatever. Build the relationship, the arrangement up into the band sound, and also auditioning little bits and pieces. And then in a lead up to get into a studio, or going to play the songs live, add them in the set, I send those demos to them, and then ultimately that's just for them to get familiar with the songs and learn them, and we get in a room together. So we get in a rehearsal room first, We get to play the songs. They, of course, completely abandon everything that I've put down on the demo, and they all do their own thing,
Yes,
which
yeah.
which is absolutely brilliant because they bring another layer of character and personality to it, which gives it the band its overall sound. And then at some point down the line, following that, that's when we get in the studio and we go like these last bunch of songs. Are done very similarly to what was the first album, the Electric Flowers album, but this second album called Hi-Fi Joyride, which you say it all is from the current song, we recorded that in basically a converted house in Crouch End, and was engineered by a guy called Ernie McCone, who himself has worked with some really big names over the years. And it's a like an old school analog studio, effectively, with live rooms, a drum kit, and the bass player and the drummer are in the same room together. And in the next room, there's me strumming a guitar, and then in the next room, there's a room where Ola might put down the vocal, and then next to the desk, Mike was playing the piano, and so
Then it's all off to the green room, yeah?
yeah,
Sounds like sounds like my youth. I
yeah.
used to knock about with the
This is
band when I was like, a very young man, as I was a roadie,
yeah.
and that almost describes a studio that we had in a place called Beaconsfield.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's literally a converted house with cables running all over the place, and the control room is in the loft, and he's surrounded by old 80s analog keyboards and things. And then, Ernie pressed record, it tells us we were rolling. Neil counts us in, and we all play the song. And then we listen back to it. And then, of course, everybody goes, oh, I think we can do that better. Let's do another take. And invariably, when you listen back to the first one's always the best.
Oh, it sounds so much fun.
Yeah, it was great doing it, and we got the whole album down pretty much, the basis for it all in a couple of days, because we'd been in the rehearsal studio, we'd been out, playing the songs live, so it is a very much the sort of technique and workflow that was done when you're going right back to the 60s, when the Beatles recorded their first album, when the Hollies recorded their first album, and subsequent albums after that. The songs would come first, they'd learn to play them, they'd go out and, perform them to an audience, and then they'd get in a studio and just bang them down, because they didn't have the technology. They had 4 tracks to play around with, and that was it. So it had to be right, it had to be done well, and the best way to get good at that is by playing them live. So we actually follow that exact same ethic, which is what we've always done and are sticking to right now, and we're kind of flying the flag a bit, really, for that way of doing things. Sort of as a rebuttal against electronic music and loops and samples and MIDI files, and now the march of AI doing absolutely everything for you, including composing the song. But we're fiercely resisting that and not getting involved in any of that whatsoever, and sticking to what we've always done, which is what I see as recording properly. And actually, when you look at the resurgence in popularity of bands from those eras who were recording live takes onto a tape machine, the popularity of those groups like Queen, Fleetwood Mac, etc., are going up and up and up again, and people are buying vinyl. So I think there's definitely a resurgence.
You just read off my YouTube playlist.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully you'll add us to it, because
I will do.
We're in that same camp. We are doing things the way that they did, because we always have done, and I always have done things that way. And actually, fairly recently, I was staying with my mother up in Stratford-on-Avon, and heard this scratching sound in the loft, and went up there to investigate, because I thought she might have bats or something, or rats up there, and it was a little bit of a pigeon invasion. So we got that sorted out. But whilst I was up in the loft, I found this box of stuff that she'd kept for years and years and years. And there was some old C90 tapes in there, which I recognised, and they got song titles written on the inlay card. So I took them all home with me and converted them all into MP3 so I could get them onto the laptop. But of course, that process has got to be done in real time if you're capturing something from a tape.
Yeah.
So you got all the hiss, you got all the wow and flutter, and they were bands' recordings from a garage rehearsal, gigs that we'd done, demos in a local studio, and some of them were me playing the original songs, singing and playing on acoustic guitar straight into a tape recorder in one take.
What?
And
Oh, that's
what's come out of
fantastic.
that, two things really. Is one, it's kind of like hard evidence that that's the way I've always done things and never deviated from that. And the other thing as well is that these songs are recorded in this analog era, because some of them go way back to the 80s, and I'd even forgotten about that they even existed. And until recently, I played them at a little radio showcase a couple of weeks ago. It's the first time some of them had ever been played live, and I'm getting comments about how good the songs are, and some of them are great, and it's quite an emotional experience really, listening to your younger self sing
So
these songs.
you've got enough almost now to make another album, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I've another two. In fact, I was already working on material for a third one, which I got. So these tapes make it 4 and 5, and some of the songs don't need anything done to them. They're great, and it's a testament to that style and that ethos of songwriting and creating music that actually what these legacy acts have proved, that they stand the test of time. Essentially, if you're creating the song organically as a human being on an actual instrument, and they sound great when you record them straight into tape, then when you add the band arrangement to that, the drums, the bass, keyboards, the vocals and everything else, you're enhancing the fullness of the production. But if you then go backwards and strip all that away, and you've got the song on an acoustic guitar, if it works like that, it'll always be a great song, which is what these sort of heritage acts have done and always done.
Yeah.
And I have always done, and I'm still doing now.
You obviously come from a musical family, yeah?
Yeah, well,
Mum and dad as well, or?
Yes, not a professional sense. But my mum was an actress in her younger days. She started off actually in the first cast of Crossroads back in the 60s, and did bits and pieces like that, and was always doing theatre. Her musical taste is more musical theatre. But the biggest musical influence on me really was my dad, because he had very, very wide taste, and he was into sort of, rock and roll in the 1950s with Bill Haley and Gene Vincent and Elvis. Then the 60s came along, and he would listen to everything from, the Beatles through Sinatra to Burt Bacharach, Matt Monro. And then the 70s came along, and he was listening to Bread and the Eagles, ABBA, John Denver, Billy Joel, Eagles, all that kind of stuff.
He's got a very eclectic taste then, hasn't he?
Yeah, very eclectic taste, but always rooted in, good music. He always used to quote this, Yehudi Menuhin phrase, which was there are only two types of music, good and bad. And
you've hit it on the head there, saying good music.
Yeah, and it's all great. It was all great music. So, when my mom was up rehearsing for plays and things, the LPs would come out, and he'd be putting them on and go, "Oh, listen to this. How about, I checked this out," and Harry Nilsson albums and all this kind of stuff. And he'd get his mates round, and I would sit, and all this music would be played, quite wide taste, but a big range. And you go, "Oh, you listen to this woman's voice now," and he put a Carpenter's album on, and even today her voice gives me goosebumps. And then that sort of stuck really. As the sort of decades came and went, that I have a strong emotional involuntary reaction to music from those eras, particularly the 60s and 70s. There's a track I heard on the radio recently by an artist I'd never heard of before, never heard the song before, and I thought, I really like that, I'll look her up. And it was a track, like an album track from a semi-obscure Canadian artist from 1973, and I thought, oh, here we go again. That's me reacting to that kind of vibe and that sound, and so that what comes out in the writing, I suppose.
But you're not alone in that, because I mean we have some emerging artists on Spectrum, and you know, some of the young ladies that come out, some of their tunes and their voices are fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, it is going back. You know, you're moving time backwards almost. You know, to
Yes, yeah, yeah. Or yeah, and I've thought about that. You know, is it going backwards, or is it just acknowledging how good that is? And when you think about the passage of time, actually, it's quite short, really. You know, when you think there are trees that are 5,000 years old, you know, and how long the mountains have been around, and all this kind of
yeah,
stuff. Human beings are on the planet for the blink of an eye, and
yeah,
some of the best sort of popular musical singer-songwriters ever are alive now. I mean, these guys that started all this off, you know, with the you know, rock and roll and stuff like that, like Mick Jagger, Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, Billy Joel. They're alive and still making music and performing right now today, and we are in a great privilege, really, to be existing at the same time as they are, so we can go and see them play. So it's
yeah.
quite.
The thing is, though, I mean, the thing that always intrigues me is that are they going to be as popular in 15, 20 years' time as?
I I think absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that, like, whatsoever. I mean, it's something like, what year are we in? It's like 64 years ago. The Beatles released their first song, and their popularity is bigger than ever. People still love the music. Went to see Billy Joel 2 summers ago in Hyde Park, and was surrounded by people in their 20s and early 30s who were singing along and knew the words to everything. You know, and I thought it would be loads of sort of, you know, older people who know him from, you know, back in the day, have followed him ever since. He's developing a whole new audience. And I think it's actually, particularly now, what AI and a lot of electronic music is highlighting is the fact that this music that's really good, well written, authentic stuff by a human being is essentially better. You know, it has empathy and has a resonance and has a character to it that electronic music will never ever be able to match at all. And you know, these people are writing about their relationships and observations on life and community and society and all that kind of stuff. And we're past the half a century mark with the Beatles and the Stones already. So in another generation's time, it's going to be close to 100 years, and we're still listening to Beethoven and
I
Mozart.
know.
I think we come from a very ageist generation, because when I was young, you didn't listen to you only listened to music that was in your age group.
Yes.
You know, anybody outside of that age group was seen as, you know, they might have been a good singer, but they were like, you know, and at my age, people like Elvis were old hat.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
And yet,
and I was a child of the Beatles,
yeah.
and anybody old didn't seem to get it.
Yeah, and yet not anymore, because
No.
you know, I have daughters in their 20s, and they're sort of gravitating towards those legacy acts, like listening to Fleetwood Mac and buying vinyl, and appreciating, you know, what Queen did and how good they were, and their catalogue, their body of works. My nephew is 17. He's getting a band together, and they don't want anything to do with AI. They want nothing to do with electronic music. They're listening to stuff that they like, and there's no one around now who's kind of giving them what they want. So they're listening to the Clash and the Sex Pistols and Blink 182 and bands like, you know, American punk bands and things.
Yeah.
And I think you know, I'm glad you brought up the ages thing, because for a long, long time, particularly the mainstream media and mainstream record companies, have basically, you know, unless you're 17 and you're jigging around wearing, you know, jeans that you've been sprayed onto you, that everybody else is irrelevant. And it's actually not true. You know, musicians get a lot better. And I think that, you know, when you get into older age groups, there's nothing out there for them that they can listen to and appreciate and get into, because what their tastes haven't really been catered for, which is why they're listening to you know, stuff that's been around now for 40, 50, 60 years. So I'm kind of trying to fly the flag there and go, you know, How about us? Listen to
Well,
us.
I think you're doing it very, very well. And
Yeah.
Robert, I've got to say thank you for coming on the show this morning. It's been great talking to you.
Really interesting.
We could go on for hours and hours and hours, but unfortunately, a little old thing called a clock has beaten
Yeah.
us. So we'll go out with Say It All, which is the one of the tracks on your album. Yeah.
Yes, it's the sort of single, if you like, out now, available everywhere on all the streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, etc. You can basically find whatever platform that you get your music from. Go to the website, which is groovyshirtclub.com, and then from there you'll be able to find how you can get the music to listen to. And it's the current song, You Say It All, and it's from the forthcoming album, which is going to be out in the autumn.